I was about to quit my delivery job and start hunting for something better when HR called me in with the strangest offer I'd ever heard. You'll only drive the CEO's son to school and pick him up. That's it. Simple. I figured easy money, right? But when I pulled up to that mansion's iron gate for the first time, something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. The door swung open and a 6-year-old boy came running out, big brown eyes, hair sticking up in every direction, and a smile that went straight through my defenses. "Are you my new driver?" he asked, bouncing on his toes. "Yeah," I said, trying not to grin too hard. "I'm Kian. I'm Soren," he shouted with pure enthusiasm. Then he spun around and yelled toward the house. "Papa, he's here." And that's when I saw him. Wesley Hale, CEO, Billionaire. The face that graced magazine covers and business articles, but standing there in the morning light, wearing a tracksuit and looking slightly disheveled, he was something else entirely. My hands gripped the steering wheel before I even realized what I was doing. "Thank you for doing this," he said, leaning slightly against the car window. His voice was deep, controlled, but there was exhaustion woven into every syllable. "No problem, sir," I managed, keeping my eyes forward because if I looked directly at him I might forget how to breathe properly. Soren climbed into the back seat, chattering about his upcoming spelling test, and Wesley closed the door behind him. I thought that was it. I thought I'd just drive off and that would be the extent of our interaction. But as I reached for the ignition, Wesley opened the passenger door and got in. My heart did this ridiculous flip that I felt all the way down to my fingertips. "Sir?" The question came out confused, uncertain. "Drive," he said simply, buckling his seatbelt. "I'm riding along today." That should have been my first clue that nothing about this job would be simple. The morning traffic was light, and Soren kept up a steady stream of conversation from the back seat about his friend Marcus and some elaborate game they'd invented involving dinosaurs and space pirates. I listened, responded when appropriate, but my awareness kept drifting to the man sitting beside me. Wesley wasn't doing anything remarkable, scrolling through his phone, occasionally typing something, but I noticed everything. The way he breathed, steady and measured. The faint scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated. The way his thumb tapped against the phone case in an unconscious rhythm. When we reached the school, Soren unbuckled himself and leaned forward between the seats. "Bye, Papa. Bye, Key." He hugged his father quickly, then surprised me by throwing his small arms around my neck from behind. The gesture was so natural, so trusting, that something warm unfurled in my chest. "Have a good day, buddy," I said, and meant it. Wesley walked Soren to the entrance, spoke briefly with a teacher, then returned to the car. I expected him to ask me to drive him to his office, but instead he said, "Take the scenic route back. I have 20 minutes before my first meeting." I didn't question it. I drove through the tree-lined streets on the edge of the city, where old houses sat behind manicured lawns and the morning sun filtered through branches overhead. Wesley watched the passing scenery with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're different from the other drivers," he said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "How so?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral even though my pulse had picked up speed. "You talk to Soren like he was a person. Not like he was my son or like you were trying to impress me through him. Just like he mattered." I didn't know what to say to that, so I settled on honesty. "He does matter. Kids always do." Wesley turned to look at me then. Really look at me, and I felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Most people don't see it that way," he said quietly. "They see him as an extension of me. Or as leverage, or as an obligation." There was something raw in his voice. Something that made me want to pull over and ask what had put that pain there. But we just met, and I was his employee, and there were boundaries I couldn't cross, so I just said, "Then most people are idiots." He laughed. Actually laughed, this surprised, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "Yeah," he agreed. "They really are." When I dropped him at his office building downtown, he paused before getting out. "Same time tomorrow?" I nodded. "Same time." But as I watched him walk away, briefcase in hand and phone already pressed to his ear, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just a job anymore. Or maybe it had never been just a job. And I'd been lying to myself from the moment I saw him standing in that doorway. That evening I sat in my small apartment and tried to process what had happened. I'd taken this position because I needed the money and the hours were reasonable. I hadn't expected to feel anything. I definitely hadn't expected to spend the entire day replaying conversations in my head, analyzing the way Wesley's eyes had crinkled when he smiled, remembering how Soren's hug had felt like trust personified. I told myself to get a grip. Wesley Hale was a billionaire CEO with a life I couldn't even imagine. I was a guy with an English literature degree working as a driver because passion didn't pay rent. We existed in completely different worlds, and the only reason we'd intersected at all was because he needed someone to transport his son safely. That was all this was. All it could ever be. But when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, my breath caught. Thank you for today. Soren hasn't stopped talking about you. WH. I stared at those words for a long time, wondering how something so simple could make my chest feel tight and warm simultaneously. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, he's a great kid. See you tomorrow. Professional. Appropriate. Completely failing to acknowledge that I'd already started counting down the hours until I'd see them both again. I plugged my phone in to charge and lay in bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling. Tomorrow would be different. I told myself, tomorrow I'd maintain proper boundaries and remember my place. But some part of me already knew I was lying. Some part of me had recognized something in Wesley's eyes that morning, a loneliness that matched my own. A hunger for connection that went deeper than either of us probably wanted to admit, and that terrified me more than anything else. Wesley shocked me by climbing into the front seat again the next morning. And the morning after that. And every single morning that followed. It became our routine. I'd arrive. Soren would jump into the back with his backpack and endless energy, and Wesley would settle beside me without explanation or apology. Sometimes he worked during the drive, fingers flying across his tablet as he responded to emails or reviewed documents. Other times he just watched the city wake up, his expression distant and thoughtful. I learned to read his moods in the small details. The tension in his shoulders meant a difficult day ahead. The way he'd close his eyes and lean his head back meant he'd been up too late working. The rare mornings when he'd look almost relaxed meant Soren had probably crawled into his bed at dawn and they'd spent an hour reading together before starting the day. I knew I was paying too much attention. I knew I should maintain professional distance. But awareness of Wesley had become as natural as breathing, and I couldn't seem to stop. 3 weeks into this arrangement, we got stuck in unusually heavy traffic. Construction had closed 2 lanes, and we sat at a standstill with engines idling and frustration building in every direction. Soren had fallen asleep in the back, worn out from his swimming lesson the evening before. The silence between Wesley and me felt different than usual, more charged somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. What made you take this job? He asked suddenly, his gaze fixed on the gridlock ahead. The pay, I answered, then immediately felt like I'd reduced something important to mere transaction. And I don't know, it sounded peaceful, I guess. Predictable, peaceful, he repeated, like he was testing the word. When's the last time you felt peaceful? The question was so unexpected, so personal that I nearly deflected. But something about the way he'd asked, genuinely curious, not making small talk, made me answer honestly. Before my dad died, I said. I was 19. Everything after that has been about surviving, not living. Wesley turned toward me then, and I felt the full force of his attention. I understand that, he said softly. After Soren's mother left, I threw myself into work. Built the company bigger, took on more responsibility, filled every hour so I wouldn't have to think about failing at my marriage. You didn't fail, I said immediately. Defensively, though I had no right to that certainty. You're raising an incredible kid by yourself. Am I? His voice held doubt, vulnerability. I miss half his school events. I hire people to do things I should do myself. I barely remember the last time we just played together without me checking my phone. The traffic started moving, forcing me to focus on driving, but I couldn't let his words sit unanswered. He talks about you constantly, I told him, about how you make funny voices when you read bedtime stories, about the pancakes you make on Sundays even though they always burn a little, about how you never miss saying goodnight, even if you have to call from the office. I could feel Wesley staring at me. He told you all, and more, I confirmed. You're his whole world, Wesley. He knows you love him. The use of his first name slipped out before I could catch it, too familiar and informal. I tensed, waiting for him to correct me, to remind me of proper boundaries. Instead he said, "Say it again." My breath caught. "What?" "My name. Say it again." The request was quiet, almost pleading. "Wesley," I said softer this time, and watched something shift in his expression. Relief mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. "Nobody calls me that anymore," he admitted. "It's Mr. Hale in meetings, Dad to Soren, Wes to my parents who I see twice a year. But just Wesley, like I'm a person instead of a position." I'd forgotten what that felt like. The confession hung between us, intimate and raw. I wanted to reach over and touch his hand, offer comfort in the most basic human way, but I kept my grip on the wheel and my eyes on the road. "You are a person," I said instead. "A good one." We drove the rest of the way to Soren's school in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something had been acknowledged between us. Some invisible line crossed that we couldn't uncross. When I dropped Wesley at his office afterward, he hesitated before leaving. "Do you have plans Friday evening?" The question caught me completely off guard. "I know. Why?" "Soren wants pizza and a movie night. He specifically requested that you join us." Wesley's expression was carefully neutral, but there was hope underneath. "You can say no. I know it's beyond your job description." Every logical part of my brain screamed that I should decline. That spending my evening at my employer's home, blurring professional and personal boundaries even further, was a terrible idea. That I was already thinking about him too much, feeling things I had no business feeling. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was, "What kind of pizza does Soren like?" Wesley smiled, really smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. "Half cheese, half pepperoni. He's very specific about it. Then I'll bring dessert," I heard myself say. "Soren mentioned he loves chocolate chip cookies. You remembered that?" The surprise in Wesley's voice made my chest tight. "I remember everything he says," I admitted. "He's easy to listen to." Wesley reached out then, just for a moment, and squeezed my shoulder. The touch was brief, probably meaningless, but I felt it burn through my shirt long after he'd walked away. That night I lay awake wondering what I was doing. Friday evening would be dangerous, too domestic. Too much like something real instead of a job. I should cancel. I should maintain distance. I should protect myself from the inevitable hurt that came from wanting something I couldn't have. But when Friday arrived, I found myself at their door at 6 o'clock sharp, a box of fresh-baked cookies in my hands and my heart beating too fast. Soren answered, already in his pajamas, and launched himself at my legs with pure joy. "You came. Papa said you might be busy, but you came." And when I looked up from Soren's enthusiastic hug, Wesley was standing in the hallway watching us with an expression that made it impossible to breathe properly, soft and warm and dangerous in its openness. "Come in," he said. "Welcome home." He probably meant welcome to his home, I told myself, but the way he said it, the way he looked at me, it felt like an invitation to something far more significant. And heaven help me, I wanted to accept. The dinner invitation had supposedly come from Soren, but when I arrived at their house that evening, the little boy was already fast asleep upstairs. Just Wesley waiting for me at the dining table, candles flickering beside wine glasses, and what looked like homemade pasta. "You cooked?" I asked, genuinely surprised as I took in the scene. "I do know how to feed myself," he said with amusement. "Being a billionaire doesn't mean I've forgotten basic human skills." "Sit." The table was set for two, intimate in a way that made my pulse quicken. This wasn't a casual dinner with an employee. This was something else entirely, and we both knew it. I sat down across from him, accepting the glass of wine he poured, trying to ignore how this felt like a date I hadn't realized I was on. The pasta was good, actually good, not just acceptable. "Your ex-wife," I started, then immediately regretted bringing her up. But Wesley didn't flinch. He just took a sip of his wine and nodded for me to continue. "What happened? I mean, you don't have to tell me. I'm just curious," he supplied. "It's fine. It's not a secret, just not something I talk about often." He set down his fork and leaned back. "Her name was Caroline. We met at a charity gala, got married too fast, had Soren maybe for the wrong reasons." When he turned 3, she told me she'd never wanted to be a mother. She said she felt trapped, suffocated. So she left. The pain in his voice was old but still present, like a scar that ached in cold weather. That must have destroyed you, I said quietly. It did, he admitted. Not because I was still in love with her, I'm not sure we were ever truly in love. But because I'd failed, because Soren asked for months when mommy was coming back, and I had to keep saying I didn't know. Because I'd built this empire but couldn't keep my own family together. That's not on you, I said firmly. She made her choice. A selfish one. Wesley met my eyes across the table. You defend me quickly for someone who barely knows me. I know enough, I countered. I see how you are with Soren. How you prioritize him even when you're exhausted. How you try so hard to be present despite everything else demanding your attention. That matters more than some perfect family photo. He looked at me like I'd said something profound instead of obvious. You see a lot for a driver. Maybe I'm more than just a driver. The words came out bolder than I'd intended. Almost challenging. Maybe you are. Wesley agreed softly. We finished dinner talking about safer topics, books we'd both read, cities we wanted to visit, embarrassing childhood stories that made us laugh. But underneath the conversation, I felt the current of something unspoken, growing stronger with each passing moment. When the dishes were cleared and we'd moved to the living room with fresh glasses of wine, Wesley asked the question I'd been half expecting and half dreading. Why haven't you pursued writing seriously? You have a degree. Talent, probably. I stared into my wine glass, watching the candlelight reflect off the dark liquid. Fear mostly. The same fear that keeps most people from chasing dreams. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? At least with driving, with warehouse work, with jobs that don't matter, I can't disappoint myself. But you're disappointing yourself anyway, Wesley observed. Living small when you could be living fully. Rich advice from a man who admitted he works 16-hour days to avoid feeling lonely. I shot back, then immediately regretted my tone. Sorry, that was accurate, he interrupted. And fair. We're both hiding, just in different ways. The honesty was almost painful. I looked at him properly, then really looked and saw the exhaustion he tried to hide. The loneliness he'd perfected concealing. The yearning for something real beneath the expensive clothes and confident exterior. Why did you ask me to stay tonight? I asked. The truth. Wesley set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. Because when you're in the car, I feel less alone than I have in years. Because Soren talks about you like your family already, and he stopped, swallowed hard. And I want that to be true. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Wesley, I know this is complicated, he continued quickly. I'm your employer. There's Soren to consider. The media would have a field day. My board would probably have collective heart attacks. But Kian, He reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and certain. I haven't felt this alive in longer than I can remember. And I hope you feel it too. I should have pulled away. Should have reminded him of all the reasons this was impossible. Should have protected both of us from the inevitable complications. Instead, I turned my hand over and laced my fingers through his. I feel it, I whispered. God help me. I feel it so much it scares me. The relief on his face was immediate and profound. Stay tonight, he said. Not in the guest room. Here, with me. It wasn't about sex, though the attraction between us was undeniable. It was about not being alone. About taking comfort in another person's presence. About admitting we'd both been starving for connection and had somehow found it in each other. Okay, I agreed. We moved upstairs quietly, not wanting to wake Soren. Wesley's bedroom was surprisingly simple for a billionaire, comfortable but not ostentatious. Lived in rather than showcased. We lay down together on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and he pulled me against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and real, and feel his breath in my hair. I don't know where this goes, he murmured into the darkness. I don't know how we make it work or what comes next. Me neither, I admitted. But right now, this moment, it's enough. We fell asleep like that, holding each other like lifelines. When I woke around 3 in the morning, Slightly disoriented, I found Wesley still awake, watching me in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Can't sleep?" I asked groggily. "Don't want to," he replied. "If I sleep, morning comes. And morning means reality. And I'm not ready for reality yet." I understood completely. This fragile thing between us felt safe in the darkness, protected, but daylight would bring questions, complications, consequences. "Wesley," I said seriously, "if we do this, if we try, everything changes. Your life, mine, Soren's. We can't take it back." "I know," he said. "I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of letting you go without even trying." He kissed me then, soft and tentative, asking permission with every touch. I kissed him back, answering yes to questions neither of us had voiced. When we finally broke apart, breathless and wanting, I saw tears on his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. "Nothing," he said, laughing slightly. "For the first time in years, absolutely nothing is wrong." We held each other until dawn, knowing that when the sun rose, we'd have to face everything we'd started. But for those few stolen hours in the darkness, we let ourselves just be, two people who'd found something unexpected and precious, and who weren't ready to let it go. The school picnic happened 3 weeks after our first kiss, and I was required to attend as Soren's designated driver. What I hadn't expected was Wesley showing up in jeans and a simple gray hoodie, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms and million-dollar deals. He looked approachable, human, devastatingly attractive in a way that made my mouth go dry. "You came," I said stupidly, stating the obvious as he walked toward where I stood near the parking area. "Did you think I'd miss it?" He seemed almost offended. "I promised Soren I'd be here. I keep my promises." Other parents were already staring. Wesley Hale didn't do school events. Everyone knew that. His appearance was unprecedented, newsworthy even in this small circle of privileged families. But he ignored the whispers and the barely concealed phone cameras, heading straight to where Soren was organizing a soccer game with his classmates. I followed at what I hoped was an appropriate distance, neither too close nor suspiciously far. We hadn't discussed what we were doing, how to act around others, what boundaries existed now that we'd crossed so many in private. The confusion must have shown on my face because Wesley glanced back and mouthed, "Relax." Easy for him to say. The day unfolded in unexpected ways. Parents naturally assumed we were together, not romantically, but as a unit. They'd make comments to Wesley and include me in the same breath. "Your family is lovely," one mother said, gesturing to where Soren was showing off his soccer skills. "Your son has his father's determination and his other father's kindness." Wesley didn't correct her. Neither did I. The assumption hung there, simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. During the 3-legged race, Soren insisted that Wesley and I be partners. We tied our legs together with the provided rope, standing closer than necessary, our bodies aligned from hip to ankle. "Ready?" Wesley asked, his breath warm against my ear. "This is ridiculous," I muttered. But I was smiling. "We're going to fall flat on our faces. Then we fall together," he said simply. And something about those words felt significant beyond their surface meaning. We didn't fall, we actually won, moving in sync like we'd been doing this for years instead of attempting it for the first time. Soren cheered so loudly that other kids turned to look, and Wesley laughed, genuinely laughed in a way I'd never heard before. Unguarded and full of pure joy. Later, while Soren played with friends near the pond, Wesley and I sat on a blanket slightly apart from the main crowd. Close enough to supervise, far enough for relative privacy. "This feels dangerous," I said quietly, watching parents pack up their picnic supplies. "Being here together like this, people are already making assumptions." "Let them," Wesley replied, surprising me. "I'm tired of hiding things that matter. Your board of directors might disagree. My board of directors don't control my personal life." His jaw tightened. "They think they do, but they're wrong." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this thing between us could exist in daylight without consequences. But I'd read enough news articles about powerful men whose careers had imploded over scandals far less complicated than a CEO dating his son's male driver. "You're thinking too loud," Wesley observed. "I can practically hear the catastrophizing." "Someone needs to think practically," I countered. "You're risking everything, for something worth having." he interrupted firmly. Stop deciding what I can and cannot risk. That's my choice to make. The conversation was cut short by Soren running over, grass-stained and exhausted. Can Kian come home with us for dinner? He asked, collapsing dramatically onto the blanket between us. Please? We can order that Thai food he likes. The fact that Soren had noticed what food I preferred, had filed it away as important information, made my chest ache. If Kian wants to, Wesley said, looking at me with a question in his eyes that had nothing to do with Thai food. Yeah, I agreed. I want to. The drive back was quiet, Soren dozing in his car seat, the radio playing something soft and instrumental. Wesley's hand rested on the center console, close enough that our fingers could touch if either of us moved an inch. I moved that inch. Our pinkies linked, a small connection that felt monumental in its intimacy. Neither of us acknowledged it verbally, but Wesley's thumb stroked the side of my hand in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. At a red light, he turned his head and looked at me with such raw emotion that I forgot how to breathe. I'm falling for you, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not casual. The light turned green. I had to focus on driving. Had to process what he'd just said while operating a vehicle with his sleeping child in the back. It's not casual for me either, I managed. I'm terrified of what that means. Good, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Terror means it matters. Dinner at their house had become almost routine over the past weeks. Soren would insist on showing me his latest school project or the new book he was reading. Wesley would cook or order food, and we'd eat together at the kitchen table like some alternate version of a family. Tonight felt different though, heavier with unspoken possibilities. After we'd eaten and Soren had been convinced to brush his teeth and put on pajamas, he appeared in the living room where Wesley and I sat with carefully maintained distance between us. Kian? Soren's voice was smaller than usual, uncertain. Yeah, buddy? Do you like being here? With us? The question was so vulnerable, so clearly important, that I set down my coffee and gave him my complete attention. I love being here, I told him honestly. You two are my favorite people. Soren's face lit up. Then, with the brutal honesty only children possess, he asked, Are you going to be my other dad? Wesley went completely still beside me. The air in the room seemed to compress, waiting. I looked helplessly at Wesley, who looked equally frozen. That's not really how it works, Soren. Why not? Soren persisted. Marcus has 2 moms. Emma has 2 dads. Papa needs someone and you're here all the time anyway and you make him smile the way he used to when I was really little. Out of the mouths of children came truths that adults spent years dancing around. It's complicated, Wesley finally said, his voice rough. Kian and I are friends, and we care about each other, but you love him though, right? Soren interrupted. I can tell. You look at him the same way Emma's dads look at each other. Wesley's eyes met mine across the space between us, and in them I saw everything. Fear, hope, longing, uncertainty. Yeah, he admitted quietly, still holding my gaze. I do. The world tilted on its axis. Those 2 words changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Then what's complicated? Soren asked, genuinely confused. If you love each other, you should be together. That's what love means. Wesley let out a shaky laugh. If only adult life were that simple, buddy. But Soren had already lost interest in the conversation, satisfied with the answer he'd wanted. He hugged us both goodnight and headed upstairs, leaving Wesley and me alone with the weight of what had just been said. Did you mean that? I asked, when I could trust my voice. Or were you just trying to explain something to Soren? Wesley moved closer, closing the distance we'd maintained all evening. I meant it. Every word. I love you, Kian. I don't know when it happened or how to make it make sense. But it's true. I should have been more careful with my response. Should have considered the implications, the risks, the 1,000 ways this could end badly. Instead, I kissed him, desperate and certain, and absolutely sure. I love you too, I whispered against his lips. This is insane. Completely, he agreed, kissing me again. Stay tonight. Really stay. And I did, following him upstairs to his bedroom, where we held each other like the world outside didn't exist, where, for a few precious hours, we could pretend that love was enough. We lasted almost 2 months before everything fell apart. 2 months of stolen moments and careful discretion. Wesley would touch my lower back when Soren wasn't looking. I'd lean into his space while driving, our shoulders brushing. We'd have late dinners after Soren went to bed, talking until midnight about everything and nothing. It felt sustainable, private, protected. We were wrong. The photos surfaced on a Tuesday morning, blurry but unmistakable shots of Wesley and me leaving a coffee shop together, his hand resting comfortably on my shoulder. Another of us at a farmer's market standing close while examining produce, looking for all the world like a couple on a weekend outing, which of course we had been. The headlines spread across gossip sites and business blogs within hours. Billionaire CEO Wesley Hale in secret relationship with male employee. Scandal rocks Hale Industries. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Unknown numbers, followed by texts from the few friends I had, asking if it was true, if I was okay, what the hell was happening. I didn't answer any of them. I called Wesley instead. "I saw," he said immediately, skipping any greeting. "I've already got my legal team working on it. This is manageable." Manageable? I repeated incredulously. "Wesley, they have photos, dates, quotes from anonymous sources about our relationship. This isn't something you can just make disappear." "I'm not trying to make it disappear," he said, voice tight with stress. "I'm trying to control the narrative before it controls us." But control was an illusion we'd been maintaining all along. And now that illusion had shattered. By noon, reporters had found my apartment building. By 2 in the afternoon, Wesley's office had released a terse no-comment statement that only fueled more speculation. By evening, his board of directors had called an emergency meeting. I knew I should stay away. Let Wesley handle this without the complication of my presence. But when he texted me at 7 asking if I could pick up Soren from his after-school program because something had come up, I didn't hesitate. Soren was quiet on the drive back to the mansion. Unusual for a kid who normally couldn't stop talking. "You okay?" I asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Kids at school said things," he admitted quietly. "About you and Papa." My hands tightened on the wheel. "What kind of things?" "That it's weird. That you're just trying to get Papa's money. That Papa is going to get in trouble because of you." Each word was a knife between my ribs. "Soren. I told them they were stupid," he continued. Fiercer now. "I said you're the best person I know. And Papa is happy when you're around, and that's what matters. But then Mrs. Henderson took me aside and said maybe I shouldn't talk about you at school anymore." The teacher had actually told a 6-year-old to hide his affection for someone he cared about. The cruelty of it made me want to scream. "I'm sorry," I said inadequately. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful." "It's not your fault that people are mean," Soren said with the simple wisdom of children. "Papa says people get scared when things are different and they say dumb stuff when they're scared." At the mansion, I helped Soren with his homework and made him dinner, trying to maintain normalcy while my phone continued buzzing with increasingly aggressive messages and calls. Around 9, I heard the garage door open. Wesley came in looking like he'd aged a decade in one day. His tie was loosened, his eyes exhausted, and there was a defeated slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before. "Hey," I said softly as he entered the kitchen. "Long day?" He let out a bitter laugh. "That's an understatement." Soren had fallen asleep on the couch, so I guided Wesley to his home office and closed the door behind us. "Tell me," I said. Wesley poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter on his desk and downed half of it before speaking. "The board wants me to issue a statement denying the relationship, call you a friend, claim the photos are being misinterpreted, threaten legal action against anyone suggesting otherwise." "Okay," I said slowly. "And you told them no?" "I told them to go to hell," he corrected, "which went over about as well as you'd imagine." He finished the whiskey. "They're threatening a vote of no confidence, suggesting I take a leave of absence until the scandal blows over. They've already had 3 major investors call expressing concern about the company's image." This was worse than I'd thought. "Wesley, your career is not more important than you," he interrupted fiercely. "I won't lie about us. I won't pretend you don't matter. I refuse to go back into a closet I never wanted to be in to begin with." The conviction in his voice was beautiful and terrifying. "You're going to lose everything," I said. "They'll force you out." "Maybe," he acknowledged. Or maybe they'll realize they need me more than I need them. Either way, I'm not sacrificing you to save face. I wanted to be brave enough to accept that, to let him fight this battle and damn the consequences. But love sometimes meant making impossible choices. What if I resigned? I suggested carefully. Issued my own statement saying this was all a misunderstanding, that I've decided to pursue other opportunities. Would that help? Wesley's eyes went cold. Absolutely not. Wesley, be reasonable. No. He set down the empty glass with enough force to make me flinch. You're not falling on some sword to protect me. We're either in this together or we're not in it at all. Then we're destroying your life together, I countered. Your company, your reputation, maybe even your relationship with Soren if courts get involved and custody becomes an issue. Stop, he commanded. Stop catastrophizing and just trust me. I do trust you, I said desperately. But I also love you, which means I can't watch you throw away everything you've built for something that might not even last. The words hung between us, ugly and honest. You think we won't last? Wesley asked, and there was devastation in his voice. I think the world will make it impossible. I clarified. The pressure, the judgment, the constant scrutiny. How long before that kills what we have? Wesley crossed the space between us and grabbed my face between his hands. However long it takes, he said intensely. I choose you, Kian. Every single time I choose you. Why can't you believe that? Because I'd never been chosen before. Because people in my life had always found me easy to leave. Because I couldn't fathom being worth the kind of sacrifice he was offering. I need time, I said instead of any of that truth. I need to think. Think about what? He sounded broken. About whether loving me is worth the cost. I pulled away from his touch and walked to the door. I'm going to go. Tell Soren I said goodnight. Kian, wait. But I didn't wait. I couldn't. Because if I stayed, I'd break down completely and one of us needed to be thinking clearly. The drive home took forever. I ignored 17 calls from Wesley and twice as many texts. When I finally walked into my apartment, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a letter on expensive law firm letterhead. The contents were brief and brutal. A settlement offer. Substantial money in exchange for my resignation and a non-disclosure agreement. A polite but clear instruction to disappear from Wesley's life. And a warning that if I refused, they had the resources to make my existence very difficult. The letter wasn't signed by Wesley. It came from his legal team, from the board, from the machine that protected billionaires from inconvenient complications. I was the complication. I sat on my floor with that letter and finally let myself cry. Not because of the money or the threats, but because I'd been naive enough to believe that love could be simple, that wanting someone could be enough, that fairy tales happened to people like me. My phone buzzed with another text from Wesley. Please come back. We can figure this out. But some problems couldn't be figured out. Some gaps were too wide to bridge. Some loves, no matter how real, weren't meant to survive. I turned off my phone, lay down on my bed, and tried to imagine a future where I could walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to me. For his sake. For Soren's sake. For everyone's sake but my own. 3 months passed like 3 years. I'd moved to a different city, found a new apartment, taken another driving job that paid less but demanded nothing of my heart. I didn't follow the news about Wesley or Hale Industries. I blocked his number after the first week when his calls and messages became too painful to ignore. I tried very hard to convince myself I'd made the right choice. I failed spectacularly. The nightmares were the worst part. Dreams where I'd be driving Soren to school and he'd ask why I left, and I'd have no answer. Dreams where Wesley would appear in my passenger seat and simply exist beside me, and I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. My new apartment was fine. My new job was tolerable. My new life was a carefully constructed lie, where I pretended to be whole while missing essential pieces of myself. Then, on a random Thursday, a package arrived. No return address, just my name written in a child's careful handwriting. Inside was a drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Papa, a smaller one labeled me, and one in between labeled Kian. Above them, written in crayon with several spelling mistakes. Please come back. Papa is sad all the time. I miss you. Love, Soren. I stared at that drawing for an hour. tears blurring the bright colors. A 6-year-old child had tracked down my new address somehow, had taken the time to create this desperate plea, had loved me enough to try. The knock on my door came 30 minutes later. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Wesley stood in my doorway looking nothing like the polished CEO I'd first met. His hair was too long, unstyled. He had a beard coming in, uneven and unkempt. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked like grief. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Does it matter?" His voice was rough, unused to the vulnerability he was displaying. "I've been looking for 3 months, Kian. I wasn't going to stop." "You should have," I said, but I didn't close the door. "That letter from your lawyers was pretty clear." "I fired them," he said bluntly. "The day I found out they'd contacted you without my knowledge. I fired the entire legal team and half the board of directors while I was at it." I blinked, processing this information. "You what?" "Resigned as CEO," he continued, like he was listing groceries instead of dismantling his entire life. "Started my own smaller consulting firm, moved to a different house outside the city, where Soren can have a yard and neighbors who don't care who I love. Completely restructured everything." "Wesley, let me finish," he interrupted. "I spent 3 months proving to myself that I could build a life that didn't require your absence. A life where loving you wasn't a scandal but a choice. A life where Soren could talk about you at school without teachers telling him to be quiet." He stepped closer and I could smell his familiar cologne, could see the desperation in his eyes. "I'm not here to drag you back into a situation that hurt you. I'm here to show you that I built something different, something that has space for you if you want it. I left to protect you," I said weakly. "I left because I loved you too much to let you destroy your career. And I let you go because I thought that's what you wanted," he countered. "But Kian, you leaving destroyed me anyway. So all that noble sacrifice accomplished nothing except making us both miserable." The truth of that statement hit hard. "Soren," I said. "Is he okay?" "No," Wesley admitted. "He asks about you constantly. He doesn't understand why you disappeared." I've tried explaining, but how do you tell a 6-year-old that sometimes adults make stupid choices out of fear? "I was protecting him too from what?" Wesley demanded. "From having someone in his life who loves him, from seeing that families can look different and still be real. You were protecting yourself, Kian, and I understand that I do. But you need to know that walking away didn't save anyone anything." The words were harsh but not unkind. They were simply true. "I don't know how to do this," I confessed. "How to trust that it can work. How to believe I'm worth the chaos." Wesley reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he cupped my face with both hands, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Then let me believe it for both of us until you catch up," he said. "Come back, not to the old situation, not to the mansion and the scrutiny and the pressure. Come back to me and Soren in our new house, in our new life, where the only thing that matters is that we're together." It sounded impossible. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded exactly like what I wanted and had convinced myself I couldn't have. "What if I'm still scared?" I whispered. "Then be scared," he said simply. "Be scared with me instead of alone. We'll figure it out together." He kissed me then, soft and careful and full of 3 months' worth of missing someone. I kissed him back, letting go of all the reasons I'd told myself this couldn't work. All the fears that had driven me away. All the walls I'd built to protect a heart that had been his all along. "I need to see Soren," I said when we broke apart. "I need to apologize to him." "He's in the car," Wesley admitted. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back with us, but I thought, maybe if you saw him." We walked down to the parking lot together, my hand in his, and there was Soren in the back seat reading a book. When he looked up and saw me, his face transformed. Pure joy and relief and uncomplicated love. I opened the door and he launched himself at me, arms around my neck, holding on like he'd never let go. "You came back," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I thought you didn't want us anymore." "Never," I promised, my own voice breaking. "I always wanted you. I was just lost for a while. But I'm here now." "Forever?" he asked, pulling back to look at me seriously. "Can you stay forever?" I looked at Wesley over Soren's head, saw the hope and love and absolute certainty in his expression, and felt something settle in my chest, something that felt like coming home. "Yeah," I agreed. I can stay forever. We drove to their new house, smaller than the mansion but warmer somehow, with a lived-in quality that spoke of actual life happening within its walls. Soren gave me a comprehensive tour, showing me his room and the backyard and the kitchen where Wesley had learned to make my favorite breakfast. That night, after Soren had fallen asleep between us on the couch during a movie, Wesley and I carried him to bed together. We stood in the doorway of his room, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in months, according to Wesley. "Thank you," Wesley whispered, "for coming back, for giving us another chance." "Thank you for not giving up on me," I replied, "for fighting your way through all my fear and finding me anyway." He took my hand and led me to his bedroom. Our bedroom now, potentially. We lay down together fully clothed, wrapped around each other, and it felt like every piece of my fractured world clicking back into place. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I need you to know that's not going anywhere. Not when things get hard. Not when people judge. Not ever." "I love you too," I replied. "And I'm done running. Whatever comes next, we face it together." We fell asleep like that, holding each other close. Soren safe down the hall, and a future spread out before us that was uncertain but ours. The next morning, I woke to Soren climbing into bed between us, his cold feet pressing against my legs and his giggles filling the room when Wesley pretended to still be asleep. This was family. Messy and unconventional and absolutely perfect. Later, over breakfast that Wesley burned slightly because he was distracted by watching Soren and me debate the merits of various cartoon characters, he asked the question I'd been both expecting and hoping for. "Move in with us," he said. "Officially, completely. Make this your home." Soren stopped mid-bite to stare at me with wide, hopeful eyes. I looked at both of them, this man who'd turned his entire life upside down rather than lose me. This child who'd loved me without hesitation or condition, and felt every last defense crumble. "Okay," I said. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Soren cheered so loudly the neighbors probably heard. Wesley's smile was brighter than the morning sun streaming through the windows. And me, I finally understood what it meant to be chosen. To be worth fighting for. To be home. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be judgments and challenges and moments when loving each other would require courage. But as I sat at that breakfast table with syrup-sticky fingers and laughter echoing off the walls and Wesley's hand finding mine beneath the table, I knew we'd face every single obstacle together, because that's what family did. And we were family now, unconventional. Hard-won and absolutely unbreakable. This was my happily ever after. Not perfect but real. Not simple but worth every complicated moment. Mine. Ours. Home.